I'd like to hand over to Mark to kick us off.
Great. Thanks, Graham. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How do we help members get through retirement? So I'm not Tim Banks. This is not an advert for Retirement Bridge. I'm sure that's coming very shortly. Other retirement income products are available. Before last year's budget, people had a relatively limited set of choices, and the quid pro quo of that is most of their risks were also managed for them, their longevity risk, their investment risk, because they would be buying an annuity probably at 65. Even before the budget, we started thinking that actually for Nest members, was it right to be buying an annuity at 65? Were there some options ahead of buying the annuity? And then the budget happened, and that opened up a whole new opportunity for innovation and new thinking in the decumulation space. So Nest launched a consultation on the future of retirement and thinking about how we address the challenges. So we've had the responses to that. And during the consultation process, some things became very clear. We're hearing that people are going to be pretty daunted by the opportunities and risks and the choices that they're facing. So it's a bit like crossing a bridge with no guardrails. That looks pretty scary. And we don't want people to stop crossing the bridge, but we absolutely think that they need some help in order to achieve good outcomes in retirement. And in particular, we think it's really important to have good default paths. So as people go into decumulation, that there is a default path, if you like, a path of least resistance, where members will come. They will obviously have to give you bank account details, but we're not requiring a lot of engagement and choice making at that point. And there's a very good reason for that. People really, as they go into retirement, one, they'll have different retirement paths. So some people go into part-time work, some people will retire immediately. And secondly, people don't really know what they want at retirement. They don't know what their income needs are going to be. They don't know what their life patterns are going to be. And so one of the first sort of key principles for good retirement solution design, we think, is flexibility in the early years. And so that default path has to give the flexibility. So the default path, if you like, will be providing the guardrails that were sort of taken away, if you like. So the key design features we came through for the consultation process, that's very, very clear. So the first, as I say, is flexibility. The second is, in the early years, a risk-managed investment product, a drawdown product which can provide good value and a sustainable, stable income. We think that product should try and keep pace with inflation, but not necessarily sort of be that inflation protection be guaranteed. So that's the second element. The third element, and in some ways possibly the most important, is providing protection of running out of money if you live to a very old age. So some sort of later life longevity insurance we think is important. So when the budget happened, people were talking about, annuities are dead, and we saw what happened to the share prices of the annuity providers. We don't think annuitization is dead, but we think it's important to provide that long life insurance, but later in life, maybe kicking in at 80 or 85. And in the US, providers are already beginning to design products with this sort of hybrid structure of a default drawdown followed by later life annuitization. Now, that could be buying deferred annuities. There are other models. So one of the Australian super funds that we've been talking to through the consultation are actually doing it on a risk pooling basis. So they're doing it themselves, more like a sort of collective DC in decumulation, where they will manage, they're effectively creating a mortality pool, and they'll manage that risk, the investment risk, through retirement and paying out if people's pots run out as they live to an old age. So just finally, I really want to capture those sort of three principles, the flexibility, the drawdown in the early years followed by the long life insurance. We're going to be launching a document, a sort of interims finding document from the consultation on Monday. In there, we've got 6 principles behind good design of DC retirement solutions for the auto-enrolled generation. So please have a look at that. That's the only plug I'm going to do. So while the guardrails are off, it looks scary. You put the guardrails back on and no one notices them. People don't think they're going to fall off the edge of the bridge. And we think that a good retirement solution basically provides that feeling of confidence so that people aren't living in their retirement concerned whether their money is going to run out, possibly living too frugally because they're concerned and because it's hard for people to make the sort of decisions that investment experts are making every day. Our members and the auto-enrolled population aren't investment experts, and we shouldn't expect them to have to make complex decisions how to invest their money, but we want them to live in retirement without fear.
Thank you, Mark. Fascinating insight into the future for Nest members. Carol, I'm suspecting that you're slightly more focused on the immediate future. I wonder what's happening at RBS at the moment.
Sure. So, thank you, Mark. I wonder if you'll permit me a moment of biography before I go into what's happening at RBS, just to help you understand that I am here to speak to the conference around the experience of people who are running schemes. And one of the things that I'm going to argue in the investment conference is that the investment solution can't be a panacea. And so permit me a moment of biography just to tell you that I am an ex-investment consultant, I am a CFA charter holder, and I have been a trustee and a scheme investment and risk manager. So when I say this to you, I don't say it as someone who doesn't understand how fundamentally important investment is and who doesn't believe that it has a huge part to play. But maybe if I give you some context in terms of RBS, but also through the discussions that I've had through the DC, NEPF DC Council, we have 28 schemes worldwide, about 300,000 members. And the UK DC scheme is one of the ones that's having the greatest focus at the moment. It's an own trust solution, about 700 million of assets and about 56,000 members. And it has very many positive features, one of which is the very generous employer pension contribution, 15% non-contributory, and low fees, and by dint of some excellent work done by the Trustees Investment Executive, very strongly performing funds. That said, we have challenges, and one of those is that since this fund was launched in 2006, it has been possible for members to take any or all of that 15% of salary as cash. Very many of them do. And I think one of the things that we can't ignore as we think about how we respond to freedom and choice in pensions is that in our scheme, well supported, well organised, and with a huge focus on engagement, around 3/4 of people are saving 4% or less, even though they're being given 15%. So the lure of cash is very strong, and I think as we look towards freedom and choice in pensions, and the investment community thinks about the fact that I'm sure, all else being equal, you would like to retain those assets, we really need to think about how we encourage people to remain invested when it becomes possible for them to access their funds as cash. And so I was asked to talk a little bit about what our key areas of focus are. And I'm, again, very conscious that on the face of it, they don't appear to be particularly investment specific. And I briefly considered playing to the gallery and talking a bit more about how we harness illiquidity premia and daily dealt funds, and whether we can truly deliver optimised drawdown products in a charge cap environment. And they are really important questions. But the truth of it is, if someone came to me with answers to both of those at the moment, whilst I'd be both grateful and impressed, I'd also be sceptical, and I'd really struggle to get them on the agenda in the next 6 months. And so I think what the investment community has to think about is something analogous to what we had to do in defined benefit And in defined benefit, remember, we only had to engage trustees, not all members. And that means to recognise that we have to think broadly and we have to work in partnership with trustees and with people running schemes if we're truly going to deliver the best outcomes for members. And that means not just thinking about optimising investment solutions, but thinking about how we support members. And whether we like it or not, whether if in our glorious rule members would have such guardrails that they would not have to be hugely engaged, the fact of the matter is that the new legislation, and in particular the requirements on trustees to act as second line of defence or providers to do otherwise, means that we don't have to make members investment experts, but we have to come up with investment solutions that recognise the context in which they're implemented. Governance budgets are strained to the max by the pace and the scale of change, and the industry must help funds meet those challenges in a holistic way. So it is no use, and I draw on direct experience here, designing a product that optimises purely from an investment perspective if you haven't considered how it will be implemented within our engagement framework and explained to members. We can't think about designing drawdown solutions and separate that entirely from the fact that somehow someone will have to take the responsibility and bear the risk associated with supporting members who are now asked to make ever more complex decisions at later stages in life. And so often I hear people talk about the investment piece of the DC jigsaw, and I truly think now that that's the wrong analogy. I think we might be closer to Jenga or something similar. We're now very overlapping, interconnected pieces, and I think that providers have to realise that to partner with schemes and trustees, the investment piece can't be plucked out without reference to the rest of the structure, and nor can it be replaced. So as you design your solutions and help us tackle these very real challenges, I think I would just make a plea to remember the members and also to bear in mind that if you turn up with a piece that's a radically different shape, it doesn't matter how gorgeous its pattern is or how beautifully designed it is. Those of us who are working with and bearing the responsibility for supporting members will not have the luxury of redesigning the whole game so that we can fit that piece in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. And Tim, I know you're going to speak a little bit about understanding members and understanding saving behaviour as well as designing investment solutions. So a good response to Carol's challenge, I hope. Over to you.
Thank you very much. No, I think you're going to hear a lot of agreement here. So I'm not sure whether that's interesting or not. So at AB, we spend our day thinking about members' investment journey. We started in the accumulation, but more recently we've been helping our clients meet the Freedom and Choice Challenge. And when it comes to decumulation, and I'm very conscious here that I'm talking to a room of very engaged investors, you're here at an investment conference, that members do need help. And I absolutely identify with the guardrails that Mark talked about. And it is interesting, and we did a lot of research at the end of last year, worked with the Pensions Policy Institute, that people will still make decisions about what they do and how they access their savings just before or just after they choose to take their savings. So I think we have to build a pathway, and we've been concerned really since 2009 when we came to the UK market, and we actually published our formal research in April 2012 on this topic around the default journey into an annuity, which for us was buying insurance on an irrevocable basis at a point that it was not needed with potentially not the right protections. So on that journey, we've launched a trust-based solution, which I'm now happy to say is up and live with some of our clients. And in thinking about how to construct a good journey, we wanted to take the principles of accumulation and repeat those in decumulation. And clearly you need to get the accumulation strategy to talk to the decumulation strategy. We've heard a lot at the conference about simplicity and scale. And clearly they bring you very great benefits. If it's easy for a member to understand what a sustainable payout rate actually is. Is there some embedded advice within the service? In terms of accessing scale, well, do you have to go into expensive drawdown of maybe 1.5%, 2% to get a good outcome, to get access to your money? I don't think you do. So let's use the scale that we have in accumulation. Let's use the best investment ideas from wherever they are in the market, but have the ability to change them and evolve strategies, because I think as both the two previous speakers said, we are going to see more innovation. It is a shifting landscape, and you need the ability to be able to react to that through time. We asked consumers, what did they want from a decumulation strategy? Not that we called it that. And this was way back in 2011, but it was very, very clear from the few hundred people that we engaged. People like choice, but they don't want to make a one-off irrevocable choice. We all like choice, but nobody wants to make a life-changing one-off choice you can't reverse. People want flexibility. I want to be able to change my mind tomorrow with little or no financial consequence. So let's build that into how we design product that keeps them on this default journey. People want accessibility, and the thing about annuities is people don't like giving away their money into a pot. You can talk to your blue in the face about pooling, but people don't get it. It's their money, they want it, and we have a generation of retirees now that are very, very concerned with legacy, and legacy defined not as partners, but usually as children, particularly in an era where children are being saddled with debt in earlier life. And finally, when we talk to them about return, people do get risk, so they do understand. They just don't really use our terminology. But they did tell us very, very clearly, I'm happy to take some risk, but I don't want you to shoot the lights out. And so that really does inform how you're going to run the defaults. And there's a big member expectation, again, from our survey. 94% of individuals have heard about freedom and choice. That's an extraordinary percentage. I've never seen that in the world of pensions before. More scarily, 46% of people thought they knew what the impact was on them. I say thought they knew, so we'll find out if they understand what emergency rate of tax is. But they are clearly expecting to access the freedoms, and there's a dilemma for corporate pension schemes, and do you do this in plan? Do you do this out of plan? And we're seeing little appetite for people doing this in plan, but there is absolutely no doubt that trustees care very deeply about what options are put in front of members in terms of how they will access the freedoms. And we're working hard with our clients to find ways to bring the two together, and I think we can do that. I was asked to talk a bit about annuities, and unlike others in the fund management world, we still see a very big role for annuities. We believe they do form part of the default journey, maybe not in their traditional form, and certainly not at the traditional time that they've been bought. And I think we run a great big risk because we've had late regulation, because of risks that will be categorised as an industry, collectively an industry that is not ready and hasn't risen to the challenge. But I think at its heart, and when I talk to providers, the thing that really worries them is compliance. Is somebody going to come back and beat me over the head because individuals made rash decisions? I think we really are at a point where we need safe harbour, US-style safe harbour principles. That's not to be prescriptive about the products that are put in front of people, but actually surely we can all sign up to what we think are good principles and actually enshrine them in regulation and get all stakeholders signed up to that, whether it's politicians, whether it's regulators, whether it's providers, whether it's fund managers, whether it's employers. Let's get all the stakeholders signed up to that so that we can move forward with confidence. And for people that were here that listened to Martin Wheatley on the first session of the conference, You know, we're a long way from that. None of us knows what's going to happen beyond 6th of April. Will there be a mad dash for cash? Who knows? But we are going to see more innovation, and we will evolve through time.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much to all of you. We're in danger, I think, of consensus breaking out up here at the table. One thing that you all touched on in one shape, form or fashion was defaults, paths, guardrails, call them what you will. And there seems to be a lot of appetite here and indeed around the industry for defaults in the system. I wonder what the panel's thoughts are on what, if anything, is stopping the creation of defaults at the moment.
So Carol's probably going to say this. It's almost too early days. So I think getting those design principles right. So we've had a shot at it for our document on Monday, and Tim's just talked about it. You need the design principles agreed and discussed before you can design the default around that. I'd say it's quite a short time since the budget, and certainly we're seeing talking to mature operators in mature DC systems such as the US and Australia, they're grappling with the same issues, coming from the other angle of complete freedom and trying to get people into sustainable products. So it's still work in progress.
I would agree. In terms of thinking about our own default, we had a fairly traditional and still do lifestyle into an annuity fund over 7 years. We haven't changed that. We already had support in place for members through an annuity broking service that would encourage them to think about the right decisions when they were doing that, and could indeed facilitate passing out to drawdown if that was appropriate. We were pretty far through thinking about what the next stage of our default fund might be early last year, pre-budget. So some of what, in all seriousness, some of what's presenting it is the fact that we're not on stable ground, that things are shifting. So the legislation itself is only just settled in terms of what we'll have to provide later. One of the changes that we've made to our fund range is we've introduced another option and a lifestyle strategy for people who want to go into cash. Because we were really worried, particularly with yields doing what they've done at the moment, that if people were planning to go into cash and they were sitting in something that was sort of very sensitive to bond yields, that they didn't actually have the capital protection they might otherwise want. We haven't put that in as our default yet because we need to see what people will do. On 6th of April, I'll have 4,000 members over the age of 55 in that DC scheme. So I don't know if I'll find out by 7th of April, but it'll be very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. But deciding on what your default is much, much harder than deciding on what your fund range should be now, I think. And if you have a scheme that's fairly homogenous, I think that's tough anyway, but if you run a scheme like the scheme I used to run before and this DC scheme that I look at now, where you have a whole range of people, short of getting a Harry Potter sorting hat and figuring out as each member comes in whether they feel like a cash person or an annuitisation person, quite how you know what a single default should be, I don't know.
Yeah. Tim, anything to add on that?
We got consensus on the stage, which I thought was great, and we're already running default pathways for people in decumulation for trust-based schemes. So, we don't say we have the perfect answer. We have an answer, and it will evolve, and we will be informed by experience in terms of what happens. But the key for us is, do you have a mechanism that allows you to react to that experience and change very rapidly without having to rip things up and start again? And I think that's we're very cognizant of that when designing our range. So we'll see more innovation. I mean, people are worried about the risks, and my one call is, let's agree the right design principles and let's have a safe harbour conversation even if we then don't enshrine that in laws, and maybe, Mark, your consultation can be the piece for sort of bringing that to the debate that it needs to have so that we can do the right job for all the members.
Thank you. Questions from the floor, please. There's one